franchise. This year, some of them have much to gain, yet much to prove. Will you fall down every time, or will you get back up?
That's the dumbest question you could ask. What?
It's your time to show up and show out. Rise to the challenge to exceed expectations. Time is not just ticking. The time to make it happen is now.
I got 3 words for you. You like that?
Our QB continued series rolls on today with a stop in the Big Easy. Drew Brees still looking for that second Super Bowl title after disappointing losses in the playoffs recently, including last season's loss to the Vikings at home. Brees gets some help with the addition of Emmanuel Sanders, but the division should be tougher with TB12 in Tampa Bay. Someone who knows all about the Bucs, 2-time Super Bowl champ Booger McFarland here with us now. Always good to see you, Booger, and have your perspective as well. Stephen A., I'm coming to you, though. Should this Saints team be the favorites in the NFC?
I'm going to say no. As much as I like them, you know, even though one year was a fluke with Minnesota, and then, you know, obviously the pass interference that wasn't against the Los Angeles Rams, and then they just flat out lost last year. Over the last 3 years, you know, it's been, to say the least, just not the kind of ending that they had anticipated. But I think their chances have been there. They haven't capitalized nearly enough on it. And I'm going to look at the San Francisco 49ers. This defense was big time. When you look at the offensive weapons that they have at the running back spot, plus with the Deebo Samuels of the world. I know they just lost Emmanuel Sanders, but George Kittle, I mean, when I look at them and the pieces that they have in place, there's no reason for there to be a drop-off. I like New Orleans. I think they're a contender. Just like I like Seattle. I think they're a contender. But I think that San Francisco's defense was so dominant last year, that doesn't just fade. And the manner in which they lost in the Super Bowl, having a 10-point lead before they gave that up and allowed Patrick Mahomes to come to the rescue, I'm just of the mindset that they will be back. And I think that when you talk about the word favorites, I think they've earned the right to assume that they have a better shot at getting the Super Bowl 55 than the New Orleans Saints does.
I think the Saints are the odds-on favorites, or at least tied among the odds-on favorites in the NFC. Who are you really putting above them at this moment? You mentioned San Francisco. I think they're right there. You can talk about Seattle, sure. You want to look at the North, the Packers, because of Aaron Rodgers, or maybe Minnesota. But the Saints are right there with those teams. And I understand what you mean, Stephen A. They've had a lot of chances. But what makes, for example, the Patriots unique is that generally dominant teams don't advance to the title game every single year or to the Super Bowl a lot of years. Dominant teams make the playoffs every year, and then it's a one-and-done elimination, so sometimes they can get bumped in the first round, sometimes they can go deep, occasionally they can win a Super Bowl. If you see a team over 15 years that wins 1 or 2 Super Bowls, goes to 1 or 2 more, is almost always in the playoffs and usually wins a playoff game or 2, that's a great franchise over that period of time. And that's basically the Saints. So just because they're not the Patriots, that's not the point. The point is, how many bites at the apple are you going to have? They're going to have another one this year. They are returning an excellent team once again, at least on paper. They added an excellent receiver, making that offense, formidable as usual. They have shown in recent years that among the dynamic offensive teams, they can stop the run better than most. I really like the Saints again this year. I would make them, if not the odds-on favorite, like tied for odds-on favorite. I don't see another team I like more than them in the NFC at this moment before the draft.
You know, Max, I'm going to piggyback off of what you just talked about with the Saints. You know, Stephen A., you talk about the 49ers and their defense, and they had one of the better defenses in the National Football League. But that was the same defense that when they came down to New Orleans, Drew Brees in New Orleans hung 40-plus on that defense. And if we're going to go a step further and say who's the favorite, aren't we really talking about which team, from a talent standpoint, can be topped off with the better quarterback? And so I would ask you, Stephen A., who do you trust more? Drew Brees being the point guard now that he has Emmanuel Sanders, Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara, or Jimmy Garoppolo, the same Jimmy Garoppolo that couldn't make the throw in the Super Bowl that could have arguably won the game to Emmanuel Sanders down the field. So I get what you're saying, and me of all people, who's a defensive guy, I love defense, but I got to go with the team that has the better quarterback, because I just don't know if I can trust Jimmy Garoppolo when the metal meets the road and they're in that playoff game, he's got to make that throw. I don't know if he can do it, or at least he didn't do it last year.
Well, here's my problem with what you're saying, Booger. I would remind you that you're talking about the Super Bowl against an AFC team. I'm talking about what they've done against their NFC foes, and that's what the subject is here. I saw Jimmy Garoppolo go throw for a combined 208 yards in 2 playoff games, and they still got to the Super Bowl. I saw him throw for 77 yards in an NFC Championship game, and they still got to the Super Bowl. Who the hell is sitting up here praising Jimmy Garoppolo as a reason why the San Francisco 49ers should be the favorites? I repeatedly said throughout this past season, there are 4 different levels you get to before you even think about Jimmy Garoppolo with the San Francisco 49ers. I talked about their secondary. I talked about Bosa and their defensive front 4. I talked about their running back. I talked about George Kittle. And I talked about the play calling of Kyle Shanahan. I brought up all those things before you even get to Jimmy Garoppolo. And so even though you can sit up there and point what New Orleans hung on San Francisco, well, what did San Francisco do against New Orleans? Because they did win that game. How they win that game? They ain't do it by scoring less. So the same New Orleans Saints that we're looking at as a favorite are the same New Orleans Saints team that gave up 46-48 to San Francisco. That's what I'm saying.
Stephen A., all those things you point out, Stephen A., are true. But here's what I'll tell you. The fact that you get to those 4 things before you get to the quarterback further validates my point from New Orleans being the favorite, because at some point when the guy that touches the football every single play, when you have to get to all those other categories before him, that's the problem. That's the reason why they aren't the favorite.
But I think you're sleeping on Garoppolo a little bit. Kittle was the most spectacular part of that play, but Garoppolo made a hell of a play with Kittle in order to beat the Saints, which is the reason that they were able to get to the Super Bowl in the first place, because it gave them home field. It's not that I don't believe in Garoppolo. I think I believe in him more than most. It's when I look at the Saints top to bottom, where's the real weakness? Do they have a guy out of the backfield? Do they have multiple receivers? Do they have a great quarterback? Do they have a line that can protect? The defense that can stop the run is really what I'm looking at an adequate level at least. Do they have a great head coach? Do they have a backup quarterback who can, he's like not just a gadget player, but he can be used as a gadget player in Taysom Hill? They have so much, Stephen A. They have come up short. And Booger, partly that's because this guy we trust, Drew Brees, has not come through on certain throws where they needed him at the end of games. But the bottom line is we've seen Drew Brees do it. And when you look at everything in its totality, the Saints, once again, look like probably the best team in the NFC on paper.
All right, excuse me. Let me get in here for a second. And Stephen A., I'll start you with this one. Tell me, where does Drew Brees now rank amongst the best quarterbacks in the NFL?
Wow. I'm not going to lie to you. I can't think of anybody other than Patrick Mahomes that's been better than Drew Brees over the last couple of years. You know how I feel about that bad man that is Aaron Rodgers. I still believe in him, but based on what we've seen the last 2 years, there's been a drop-off a couple of years ago due to injury last year, playing with a new coach for the first time in more than a decade, in Matt LaFleur. And by the way, just breaking news, y'all, I actually owe Coach Matt LaFleur an apology. I was told by sources in the NFL that Matt LaFleur is not a fan of mine because he doesn't like it when I call him LaFleur. He does not like that at all. He considers it an insult. It is his name given to him by his parents. I want to apologize on national television. I meant no harm. I was just having fun because the name is spelt like you're from France or something. That's all it was. It was just fun. I meant no harm whatsoever. I'll never do it again. His name is Matt LaFleur. That's what I'm going to call him, and I'm not going to play with the pronunciation of his name ever again. My apologies to the coach of the Green Bay Packers. I meant no harm, no ill will. I was just having fun. So we'll call him Matt LaFleur. Bottom line is this. I look at Aaron Rodgers playing with him, and I'm saying, hey, you're still Aaron Rodgers. You're still great, but Drew Brees has looked better than every other quarterback in the NFL outside of Patrick Mahomes throwing that football over the last several years. I would say Drew Brees at number 2.
To me, this is almost like pound for pound in boxing, Stephen A. It's not about fairness. It's about who I would really take right now. I would take Mahomes over Brees. I would take Rodgers over Brees, although the evidence from last year, I'd be hard-pressed to prove it. But I would take Rodgers over Brees. I would take Russell Wilson over Brees. That's 3, putting Drew Brees at 4. And then finally, I would take Deshaun Watson over Brees. And I know that that's a tough one. Brees is way more accurate, but there's Deshaun Watson got something that I want that on my team. I put Drew Brees in the top 5, either 4 or 5, push come to shove, 5.
Russell Wilson, Patrick Mahomes, Tom Brady, Deshaun Watson are probably guys, if you surround them with equal weapons with Drew Brees, I would take over. But if you're looking at your quarterback, kind of the way that the New Orleans Saints are looking at Drew Brees, he's the ultimate point guard. Drew Brees doesn't have to have the same arm strength that Patrick Mahomes or the flair that Deshaun Watson has. He's got to be the ultimate distributor of the football. And now that he has finally a number 2 receiver, which they didn't have for a long time, and they've gotten rid of the Jimmy Graham at the tight end position. If you look at New Orleans, Emmanuel Sanders, Alvin Kamara, Michael Thomas, they have a plethora of weapons now on the offense. And Cam Jordan and those boys on defense, I do think Drew Brees is right there. He's still a top 5 from a performance standpoint quarterback.
Booger, thank you so much for being with us. And I just quickly want to commend Drew Brees and his wife off the field. They continue to be leaders in that community. Yeah. New Orleans is being hit very hard in the aftermath of Mardi Gras. They donated $5 million, Brittany, in Drew Brees to relief efforts. So, yes, we applaud them. Booger, the best to you and your family. We will talk to you soon. And oh, Booger, I'm here and you're staying with us. Good stuff. All right, so Booger's sticking around for this next debate. When we come back, we'll be talking about Michael Jordan. It is the 30th anniversary of Jordan putting up a career-high 69 points on the Cavs. So who's the closest player to MJ in sports right now? Stephen A's answer might surprise you.